शैवतेत्रयः अर्थशास्त्रं चतुर्थन्तु विद्या अष्टादशैव ताः। ओम शांति शांति शांति। नमस्ते सबको। मैं ये प्रेजेंटेशन हिंदी में भी शायद कर सकता हूँ, लेकिन टेक्निकल टर्म्स काफ़ी ज़्यादा हैं, इस वजह से आपके अनुमति के साथ मैं इसको अंग्रेज़ी में करूँगा, इंग्लिश में प्रेडोमिनेंटली, और थोड़ा बहुत हिंदी। वो इस वजह से नहीं है कि मैं हिंदी में नहीं कर सकता हूँ, लेकिन वो टेक्निकल टर्म्स को ट्रांसलेट करने में बहुत टाइम वेस्ट हो जाएगा और दैट माइट नॉट बी यूजफुल। इस सेशन का 40 मिनट शेड्यूल में था, लेकिन हम शेड्यूल के बिहाइंड हैं और सुरेंद्र जी ने कहा कि हम 30 मिनट्स में उसको कवर करने की कोशिश करें। So, the title of my presentation is Revisiting the Epoch of Buddha as part of the ABC of Indian Chronology. Now, रवि प्रकाश आर्य जी ने अपना एक पूरा सॉल्यूशन दिया है क्रोनोलॉजिकल फ्रेमवर्क के लिए, वेदवीर आर्य जी ने अपना एक सॉल्यूशन दिया है, और इसके बाद हम कोटा वेंकटाचलम जी का भी पूरे फ्रेमवर्क सॉल्यूशंस देखेंगे। तो ये जो सॉल्यूशंस हैं वो फ्रेमवर्क लेवल पे है, सिर्फ कुछ इपॉक्स नहीं, लेकिन पूरे फ्रेमवर्क के, राइट। तो मेरा प्रेजेंटेशन वैसे नहीं होने वाला है, इट्स नॉट अ फुल फ्रेमवर्क जो मैं प्रेजेंट करने वाला हूँ, बट स्पेसिफिकली बुद्ध पर जो वेस्टर्न स्कॉलरशिप भी है उसके साथ एंगेज करके उनके स्कॉलरशिप में पोटेंशियल एरियाज ऑफ चैलेंजेस जो है और उसका व्हाट इज द सॉल्यूशन फ्रॉम आवर पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू वो प्रेजेंट करने वाला है, ठीक है। उसके पहले ये ABC ऑफ इंडियन क्रोनोलॉजी जो हमने एक्रोनिम क्रिएट किया है, इसका A is for the Aryan problem, Aryan migration to be specifically, B is Buddha Gautama, the other B is Mahabharata, and C is Chandragupta Maurya। अगर इन तीनों को हम हैंडल करेंगे, चारों को rather, we will be able to, the impact on the overall chronology is significant. So Conrad Els ji जो यहाँ पे थे, I didn't know that you're going to be present here, but it's good to see you। 2021 में इस प्रेजेंटेशन का एक वर्जन, ये प्रेजेंटेशन जो है हमारे इस वॉल्यूम में IGNC ने पब्लिश किया है 2019 में, द पेपर, उसका एक वर्जन 2021 में जो प्रेजेंट किया था, उस प्रेजेंटेशन के बाद Conrad Els had put in the comments कि most approaches so far have not been multidisciplinary, so this is a great breakthrough। Sangwon Rinpoche जो है वो तिब्बत में बुद्धिस्ट स्टडीज के हेड हैं तिब्बत में, तो उनको हमने हमारा पेपर भेजा था और उनका जो फीडबैक है उस पेपर पर वो यहाँ पे है। दिस इज जस्ट एज बैकग्राउंड, सो आई एम गोइंग टू स्किप सर्टेन पोर्शंस बिकॉज ऑफ टाइम। दिस थिंग आई वांट टू मेंशन ओवर हियर, lot of us we are talking about these issues, but here is an example of some practical change somewhere that we were able to get implemented through our scholarship। This is on the National Portal of India। हमारे देश का एक वेबसाइट है जिसका नाम है नेशनल पोर्टल ऑफ इंडिया। इसमें इतिहास के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन लिखा गया है, एंशिएंट हिस्ट्री, फिर मिडिवल हिस्ट्री और मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री। थ्रू अ कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ RTI एंड पब्लिक ग्रीवेंसेस हमने इसमें 7 चेंजेस, हमने पिटिशन डाला और उसके बाद 7 चेंजेस इम्प्लीमेंट किए गए हैं जो आप अभी वेबसाइट में जाके चेक कर सकते हैं। थैंक यू। ये जो है इसमें बेसिकली आर्यन रिलेटेड जो भी कंटेंट था और जो भी संस्कृत रिलेटेड कंटेंट है, संस्कृत, इंडो यूरोपियन, प्रोटो इंडो यूरोपियन, हमने सिर्फ 7 सवाल पूछे थे, हमारा रिसर्च था, लेकिन क्वेश्चन के फॉर्म में हमने उनको प्रेजेंट किया था और ये रफली 2017 से है। आप देख सकते हैं द एग्जैक्ट RTI रेफरेंस, द ग्रीवेंसेस, प्राइम मिनिस्टर ऑफिस भी इन्वॉल्व हुआ था। एज ऑफ नाउ, इवन आफ्टर 8 years, these changes remain। So वो इन्वेजन को रिमूव किया गया। ये इसलिए प्रेजेंट कर रहा हूँ कि एक बात होती है कि हम ऐसे मिले और आइडियाज डिस्कस करें, लेकिन उसका एक्चुअल इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, कहीं कोई चेंज जो नजर आना चाहिए, हमारे एक्सपीरियंस में ये एक एग्जाम्पल रहा है, ठीक है। सो आई विल स्किप महाभारत, नाउ आई विल कम टू व्हेन डिड द बुद्ध लिव। दिस इज द बुक व्हेन डिड द बुद्ध लिव। It is edited by Heinz Beschert। Okay, published by Sadhguru Publications in Delhi in 1995. जहाँ तक हमने देखा है, this is the most voluminous 387 pages, most voluminous publication, multidisciplinary publication, मतलब आर्कियोलॉजी का भी है, टेक्सचुअल एविडेंस का भी है, अलग अलग डिसिप्लिन्स का उन्होंने कोलेट करके इसमें पब्लिश किया है. दैट कंसर्न्स इटसेल्फ प्राइमरीली विद द इपोक ऑफ बुद्ध. ये प्योरली बुद्ध के इपोक पर बेसिस है. एंड हमारे जो इतिहास लिखते हैं दिल्ली में, उपिंदर सिंह जी के किताब जो अभी दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी में अंडर ग्रेजुएट में पढ़ाए जाते हैं, इस वर्क को एडवांस्ड वर्क के तौर पे पेश किया जाता है. ओके, तो मैं बस ये कॉन्टेक्स्ट बिल्ड कर रहा हूं कि इसका महत्व इस रूम या हम जैसे लोगों से अगर हम बाहर जाएंगे तो इसका महत्व काफी ज्यादा है. राइट, सो जब हम दुनिया से एंगेज करेंगे, यहाँ पे हम प्रीचिंग टू द कन्वर्टेड मोड पे हैं, ब्रॉडली हम सब एक दूसरों से वी एक्सेप्ट, लेकिन बाहर के दुनिया से जब हम मीट करेंगे तो वो आपको ये किताब दिखाएंगे. अच्छा, बुद्ध पर आपने रिसर्च किया, आपका इसका खंडन क्या है, इस मत का आपका रिस्पॉन्स क्या है, वो क्वेश्चन शायद आ सकता है. एटलीस्ट हमने एक्सपीरियंस किया था तो उसको हमने अटेम्प्ट किया है. लेकिन बेशर्त के शब्द में ही हम पहले इसको समझें कि बुद्ध का क्रोनोलॉजिकल कैलकुलेशन सिग्निफिकेंट क्यों है. Most chronological calculations concerning the age of Brahminic literary works on the development of early Middle Indic languages etc. are based on this date, because both Western and South Asian researchers made all relevant calculations using this chronology as a starting point. The same may be said for many datings of archaeological finds in the pre-Mauryan period. Unquote. ये वेदवीर आर्य जी नहीं बोल रहे हैं, ये हाइंस बेशर्ट खुद बोल रहे हैं कि बुद्ध का इंपॉर्टेंस क्यों है. उन्होंने भी एक्सप्लेन किया था कि बुद्ध का इंपॉर्टेंस क्या है. सो ये इसलिए बोल रहा हूँ कि इवन इन द वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड दे आर वेरी अवेयर कि इस क्रोनोलॉजिकल कैलकुलेशन का इम्पैक्ट किन किन चीजों पर है. अर्ली मिडिल लैंग्वेजेस वी जस्ट सॉ, वी आल्सो सॉ ऑन आर्कियोलॉजी itself. Archaeology is supposed to be an independent discipline, right, giving us independent dates. But here you have Heinz Becher saying the same may be said for many datings of archaeological finds in the pre-Mauryan period. So this becomes extremely critical when you're looking at overall Indian chronology. So as a quick summary, ये शायद आपको रेजोल्यूशन की वजह से क्लियरली नहीं दिखाई देगा. इस रूम के अगर हम बाहर जाएंगे, बुद्ध के क्रोनोलॉजी के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू अगर वी टॉक, you will hear words like long chronology, corrected long chronology, short chronology. ये terminologies we will hear. What is this long chronology? Vedveer Arya ji touched about it, which is the Ceylonese chronology, right? Roughly, where the Parinirvana is supposed to be roughly around 544 BCE. Okay, that is what is, just keep this in your mind and we will come back to each of these. Long chronology 544 BCE, corrected long chronology 487 BCE, short chronology is 368 BCE, और उसके बाद हाइंस बेशर्ट का अपना खुद का मत है. This is just definitions before we go forward, ताकि हम समझें कि ये सब क्या है. अभी बेशर्ट जिनको हार्वर्ड में और उपिंदर सिंह जी एक्सेट्रा इतना मान देते हैं, उनका क्या मत है? उनका वो करेक्शन ऑफ द लॉन्ग क्रोनोलॉजी, मतलब जो लॉन्ग क्रोनोलॉजी था उसको जो चेंज किया गया था, उस करेक्शन को वो मानते हैं, लेकिन वो डेट अलग सोचते हैं. ठीक है, करेक्शन को मानते हैं, वो लॉन्ग, करेक्टेड लॉन्ग और शॉर्ट क्रोनोलॉजी तीनों को रिजेक्ट करते हैं. हाइंस बेशर्ट खुद इन तीनों क्रोनोलॉजियों को रिजेक्ट करते हैं और उनके मत के हिसाब से निर्वाण का टाइम रफली 400 और 350 BC के बीच में है. ठीक है, अभी तक आप मेरे साथ हैं? यस, और थोड़ी आवाज के साथ बोल सकते हैं? यस, क्लियर, गुड, ओके. नाउ चंद्रगुप्त का अगर हम भारतीय क्रोनोलॉजी का किसी भी लैंग्वेज में पब्लिकेशंस में सिर्फ क्रोनोलॉजी पर publications देखना चाहते हैं, तो the earliest that I have come across, Manogya and I have come across, is this book called The Chronology of India, by Mabel Duff, published in 1899. उसमें साफ साफ 1899 is significantly after William Jones, after Max Muller, etc. etc. तो उसमें लिखा गया है कि Chandragupta establishes the Maurya dynasty at Pataliputra. The chronology of this dynasty and that of Buddha's date are determined by the initial date assigned keyword assigned to this king, right? So what is this assignment and what is the basis of this assignment? Obviously follow, right? Similarly, in the same book it says to Sir William Jones, वो खुद बोल रहे हैं, to Sir William Jones we owe the identification of Sandracoptus of Greek writers with Chandragupta, the founder of the Maurya dynasties, whose date BC 315 affords a starting point from which, with the aid of Sinhalese and other Buddhist records eked out from the Puranic tradition. So the Puranic tradition is important only insofar as it supports that view, because otherwise even they can't construct the chronology, right? But the starting point is fixed, then they take the Sinhalese tradition, then they take the Puranic tradition, and this is in their own words, not mine, right? It is there, you can verify and check it. Okay. So James Ussher was mentioned, 4004 BCE was mentioned. This is the exact reference from William Jones' work, where he actually says Chandragupta as Sandracoptus, and I'm not going into it. Obviously, उसमें Chandragupta Maurya, क्यों Maurya, why not Gupta, वो सब उतना कष्ट नहीं लिया उन्होंने विलियम जोन्स ने, क्योंकि अगर मौर्य हो तो the reduction in chronology is maximum. अगर गुप्त हो तो और 600 years उनको explain करना पड़ेगा. तो उन्होंने अभी चार्ल्स पेट्सोल्ड का एक बहुत एंटरटेनिंग राइटअप है इस विषय में एनसाइक्लोपीडिया ब्रिटानिका में, ये पूरा 4004 BC का. तो दुनिया आगे बढ़ चुकी है, उनके ओन एनसाइक्लोपीडियाज में उसका काफी मजाक उड़ाया जाता है. सो दिस इज द क्रोनोलॉजिकल टेबल जो है, जो दिस इज फ्रॉम विलियम जोन्स वर्क वेयर ही इज फोर्स फिटिंग द Bharatiya chronological epochs, which is on the right. You can see Manu, then you see Rama, you see Pradyota, Buddha. All of these are on the right, and on the left is the Christian chronology, right? So you have clear evidence from their own publications on how this force fitting, right, comments. जहाँ तक मैंने देखा है, इसके पहले इसका evidence clearly इतनी पूर्ण और clear रूप से नहीं मिलता है. So therefore it is important to ask the question, before William Jones and maybe even before 16th century, what was the view of Indians about Buddha, right? That's a good question perhaps to ask. Before 16th century, what did Indians think was the epoch of Gautama Buddha, Mahavira, etc.? And if we try to look at those answers, we might escape some of these pitfalls. And that is where Troyer, I think, is a useful reference. Now, Troyer जी जो हैं, उन्होंने फ्रेंच में कल्हण का राजतरंगिणी को ट्रांसलेट किया था. He translated the entire राजतरंगिणी into French in the middle of 19th century. Now, उनके टेक्स्ट को फ्रेंच से इंग्लिश में ट्रांसलेट किया गया है, और वो बोलते हैं कि that Chandragupta, according to the Hindus, lived 1502 years before the Christian era. ऐसे करके M.A. Troyer is not a Hindu, he is not from RSS, he is not a Sanghi, he is none of this, right? And he has no reason to say or elevate the date of the Indian eras, right? All he is saying, Troyer is saying, is that in his understanding, the Hindus, right, thought of Chandragupta Maurya as living around 1502 years before Christian era. For us, this is a good independent data point, right? Because it is very hard for us to find published texts before William Jones or around William Jones, which gives us our own time in a relatable date, right? 1502 before BC. Before Christ करके बोल रहे हैं. So that I think is important. And वो खुद बोल रहे हैं. Troyer is saying Chandragupta Maurya is not the Sandracoptus Greek and Roman historians, right? This is Troyer saying it. So while Kota Venkatachalam ji, Narayan Shastri ji and lot of other people have said it subsequently, one way to look at it is Troyer is perhaps amongst the earliest to start, if not the earliest, to actually critique this, right? And it is useful for us because you cannot say Hindu nationalist, you cannot say any of such things, right? He's an independent historian. And he's saying, in translation, we must above all leave aside the opinion of European writers today. ऐसे करके वो बोल रहे हैं तब, as a European himself. So one could see this as him calling out the Eurocentrism of his day, right? But what is that Eurocentrism? Let us quickly understand in the context of Bashart's work over here, okay? So, इस book में there are multiple essays. One of the essays is by Siglinde Dietz. Siglinde Dietz, she presents an overview of all Western scholarship on the date of Buddha, starting from the earliest times until 1980. This is the exact title of her work. The dating of the historical Buddha in the history of Western scholarship up to 1980. So अगर पूर्व पक्ष करना है तो उन्होंने अपना काम काफी आसान कर दिया है कि ये क्लेम करके कि उन्होंने पूरा ओवरव्यू इस एक एसे में डाल के रख दिया है। इस एसे के 3 भाग हैं। उसका प्रथम भाग जो है 1837 में एंड होता है, राइट, फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग टू 1837। उस प्रथम भाग में वी फाउंड 27 नेम्स मेंशन। ये जो अभी स्क्रीन पे देख रहे हैं ये सब नाम मेंशन, मैथ्यू रिकी 1584, फिलिप कपलेट, ये सब लोग हैं जिन्होंने बुद्ध पर कोई ना कोई ओपिनियन क्रोनोलॉजिकल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से दिया था, ठीक है। 27 एटलीस्ट है इसमें। और कहीं पर खुद सिगलिंड डायट्स एक्नॉलेज करते हैं कि एक पुरानी क्रोनोलॉजिकल इरा भी है जो 1500 बीसी के आसपास है, लेकिन इस पार्ट 1 में उन्होंने उसको कन्वीनियंटली इग्नोर कर दिया है। ये एक सिलेक्शन बायस जो हम बोलेंगे उसमें एविडेंट है। लेकिन इसका महत्व क्या है कि उन्होंने इनमें से एक ऐसे हैं जिन्होंने कहा कि जीसस क्राइस्ट और बुद्ध सेम है, ऐसे भी मत हैं, यू नो, फ्रॉम दोज टाइम्स, ओके। सो हमने इसको समराइज किया है और जब हम समराइज करते हैं हमें ब्रॉडली 5 कैटेगरीज मिलती हैं। एक जो है सियमीज, सिंहलीज या दोनों, इनके डेट्स जो है रफली 544 542 बीसी तक आते हैं, राइट, परिनिर्वाण के। फिर आते हैं क्रिश्चियन व्यूज जो बोलते हैं कि बुद्ध और जीसस सेम है। एक फादर है जो बोलते हैं कि बुद्ध का डेट 1000 बीसी होना चाहिए, और कोई है जो 959 बीसी बोलते हैं। चाइनीज डेट्स फिर आते हैं चाइनीज सोर्सेस से, उनका 1026 बीसी है, 1027 बीसी है, 688 बीसी भी है। फिर टिबेटन व्यूज आते हैं 962 बीसी, राइट। सो ऐसे हमने समराइज किया है। अभी लॉजिकली एक क्वेश्चन तो आएगा ना कि अगर इफ यू आर सेइंग दैट द डेट ऑफ बुद्धा इज 544 BC या 542 BC, the Ceylonese, why did you pick that, right? After William Jones at 1836, अगर हम वहाँ खड़े हो जाते हैं तो जो भी पढ़ रहा है उनको ये सब डेट्स तो मालूम होने चाहिए, right? These are the options. इसमें से तुमने पुराना डेटा पॉइंट पहले इग्नोर कर दिया, वो होता है सिलेक्शन बायस, राइट। You have ignored something, you have selected something which suits you and you have ignored the rest. Second होता है hasty generalization, मतलब आपने quickly conclude, जल्दी conclude कर दिया कि Sinhalese is the right one. You have not explained why the Chinese one is wrong. You have not explained why the Tibetan one is wrong. You have not explained why the Puranic one, you have not even considered the Puranic data point, right? So there's a hasty generalization which results in what is called the long chronology, right? So selection bias, then hasty generalization. After that, there is a confirmation bias, right? Which leads to the corrected long chronology. वो confirmation bias क्या है? Sinhalese tradition, Vedvi Raje ji touched upon it. Sinhalese tradition 544 BC, लेकिन सैंड्रोकोटस और चंद्रगुप्त मौर्य का तब तक ऑलरेडी डिसाइड हो गया था, विलियम जोन्स के गैप आ रहा था 60 इयर्स का, तो उसको करेक्ट करना था, राइट। सो पहले आपने सिंहलीज को एलिवेट किया, यू एलिवेटेड द सिंहलीज बिकॉज इट हेल्प्स यू गेट क्लोजर टू the Sandrocotta synchronism. Anything else, the Chinese you'll have to explain more, Tibetan you'll have to explain more. So you prioritize the Ceylonese because it helps you get closer to Sandrocottist, but it is still not good enough, right? So you correct what you elevate. That's why it's called corrected log chronology. अच्छा है लेकिन उतना अच्छा नहीं है जितना हम चाहते हैं, right? It has to match the synchronism. Finally, correct, tailor-made. And then finally, when were the edicts deciphered and by whom? Who deciphered? Who's attributed the decipherment of the so-called Ashokan edicts? James Prince. When was that? Roughly? 1830s, right? 1836, 1837. उस टाइम पे आर्कियोलॉजी में या रेडियो कार्बन डेटिंग था क्या? 1830s में रेडियो कार्बन डेटिंग when did that come out? 1950s. So what was the basis for dating the edicts? Today, if you go to a classroom in undergraduate studies in Delhi University and you ask them what is the primary source basis for the date of Ashoka or date of Buddha, chances are that they will point to the edicts, right? They will say, don't you know of the Ashokan edicts? The Ashokan edicts are from the 3rd century BCE, right? So as a humble student, I asked back, but how are the edicts dated to the 3rd century BCE, right? That's the next question. It's a logical question. You will see that the edicts were dated in the 19th century first. And what underpinned the dating are at least two things primarily. First is the synchronism effect itself, which it is easy to argue today is arbitrary, right? Why is Sandrocotta not Chandragupta Gupta? Because it could be Chandragupta Maurya. If you're saying it sounds like Chandragupta, why not Chandragupta Gupta? Why not Samudragupta? Sandrocotta, if you can admit that Chandragupta sounds like Sandrocotta, which I find certain difficulties in admitting, why not Samudragupta? It sounds closer to Samudragupta than Chandragupta to me, personally speaking. But so that's the easier problem to solve. The other problem again was alluded to, which is the mention of the Greek kings in the inscriptions, right? So अगर inscription में जो Greek kings के नाम है और अगर उनके dates fix हो गए हैं, the dates of that is fixed, then we have a problem. There is a Western view on when their kings are. Those dates are mentioned in our inscriptions. Do we accommodate that or not? The Chinese, when I lived in China for 9 years, they are very likely to say, you have your view, I have my view, we can agree to disagree on this point, right? That is one way to approach it. But what we see is an active prioritization of the Greek framework, which is evident from the Sandrocotta synchronism itself in the first place, right? Because everything needs to fit into that. If it doesn't fit that, then we have a problem. Similarly, now for instance, Ashok Atluchkar, who's taught in Harvard, who's Sanskritist, who's taught in Harvard, he has his own view on why he feels that the edicts were not actually commissioned by Ashok himself when he was alive. He posits at least a 600-year difference between when the edicts were actually written and when Ashoka lived. For him, the edict number 14 does not really, it talks about somebody else collating all of this information. It doesn't sound like the Raja, that's one. Second, the edicts are found in, some of them are found in really random places, inside a cave. अगर किसी को पढ़ने के लिए आप ये लिखवा रहे हो, then why would you write it in these, obscure places? Second. Third, he also puts across an argument that Devanam Priya, right? Do people who are alive write Devanam Priya about themselves? Or is it more likely that somebody who is passed away and somebody else is remembering him as Devanam Priya and Priyadasi? So he raises these questions. I am not saying that all of these are right, wrong, etc. But I think these points should be open for a debate. Because if the edicts are not contemporary to Ashoka, actually commissioned by him, then these Greek mentions, those 5 kingdoms, etc., don't matter anymore, right? That is not an obstacle to have this conversation with anybody else. So that's another area. Now, so this is on the philology section. So my point of view, say, ye char, at least these errors are there, right? In this volume, which is considered the Bible, if you would like, of dates of Buddha. Next is the archaeology section. Now, isme there is a article written by Herbert Hartel, right? When was this published? I told the year. When was this published? 1995, right? Keep that in the back of your mind. So in 1995, there is an article by Herbert Hartel on archaeology, which Hans Beschert endorses as the most comprehensive archaeological position of Western scholarship on the date of Buddha. Okay? तो अगर इसको हम क्वेश्चन कर सकते हैं या इस पर हम न्यू एविडेंस ऐड कर सकते हैं, तो आर्कियोलॉजी के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से जिस हद तक ये ऐसे इंपॉर्टेंट है, उतना तो हम उसको कम इंपॉर्टेंट कर सकते हैं, है ना? इट्स अ फेयर अप्रोच. आई एम नॉट सेइंग हर्बर्ट हार्टेल इज रॉन्ग. इन 1995 उनका मत जो है वो ऑरेंज में है. ओके, उन्होंने 9 sites, he opined on 9 sites in this article. 6 of those 9 sites he had some chronological view. The 6 sites were Vaishali, Shravasti, Kaushambi, Rajagraha, Bodhagaya and Lumbini. And I've just put the summary over here. For Vaishali, Hartel says the earliest habitation is around 500 BCE. For Shravasti, Hartel says not older than 6th century BCE. For Kaushambi, not earlier than 6th century BCE. For Rajagraha, at best be pushed down to 500 BC. For Bodh Gaya, very old settlements area back to Chalcolithic times, he himself concedes. Very old, back to Chalcolithic times. And for Lumbini, first settlements do not reach even 5th century BC. This is as of which year? 1995. We wrote this paper roughly in 2019, the first draft of it. In between, you had publications by our own archaeologists like Dr. B.R. Mani, amongst others. There is one particular paper in this dialogue quarterly, Astha Bharati, which is called No Dark Age in Indian History, Archaeological Evidence. Okay, this is July-September 2013, volume 15, number 1. Okay. Now, Vaishali, Shravasti, Kaushambi, Rajagraha, each of these are referenced in Dr. Mani's article. You can go over to National Museum Institute. He is the Vice Chancellor over there right now. You can have a conversation and double verify with him directly. For each of these, he says settlements 2nd millennium BCE tak we have evidence, right? So what Hartel is saying as 500 BCE, Mani has refuted by saying we have at least until 2nd millennium BCE. So we are not saying Hartel is wrong about 500 BC at that point of time, but because we have new evidence, right, it is natural that you should consider the later evidence which has come also when you're discussing. So we think that Hartel's essay for these 5 sites, right, are undermined by Mani's findings subsequently. Right? This is a reasonable point I would think to make. Lumbini, there is an even additional kind of paper which was published by Cunningham et al. In Antiquity Journal. It is called the earliest Buddhist shrine excavating the birthplace of Buddha. Okay, that's the name of the paper. And I will quote from page 109. Radiocarbon samples from 2 contemporary post-hole fills, context 553 and 557, provided dates of 799 to 546 BCE and 801 to 548 BC, suggesting an extremely early delineation of sacred space within this locality and pushing the activity at Lumbini far before the reign of Ashoka. Right? So this is an archaeological, this is a paper on archaeology published by an archaeologist, not in India. You cannot say any of the Hindu nationalists arguments, etc. And we are getting dates of this range, right? 799, 801. If these are the calibrated 95.42 sigma calibrated dates, but the 68.2 1 sigma dates, they go back even further. There is one post-hole fill which gives 1627 to 1601. A non-calibrated view goes back to 2450 plus or minus 30. 2548 plus or minus 30. So I am going to be super conservative, right? I'll take the last extreme of what has been mentioned, right? So the last extreme in all of this is 546 BCE. Okay? So either Cunningham et al. Are wrong, which somebody has to make a case, right, why they are wrong, or Buddha के बाद ही मंदिर हो सकता है ना उनके. I think that's a reasonable assumption to make that some time must have elapsed. So for us, from an archaeology point of view, specific to Buddha, there's a very clear terminus antiquem. It cannot be after 546 BCE at least, right, from an archaeology point of view. Bear in mind that B.R. Mani has taken care of the rest of it, right, where he has said that settlements-based arguments, you can't keep it to 500 BC anymore because we have enough evidence. And after B.R. Maniji's work, you also have our chariot, which has been found in Sinoli, etc. Clearly, just cavemen couldn't have made a chariot like that. So that is an indication, whether it is not from the Mahabharata time or not, but it does speak to a certain sophistication in civilization to be able to create that. And that is roughly pegged conservatively between 1500 to 1800 BC. Some put it at 2000 BC as well, right? So that is further substantiation of B.R. Mani's point of view. So that is on the archaeology part. So we looked at philology, we looked at archaeology. Now we move on to astronomy. And notice that our findings for section wise would be different. It is not exactly the same findings. So in archaeology, in astronomy, my co-author Manogya Shastri, she's not here, she's in Europe right now. She's from the Indian Institute of Astrophysics. So she's actually qualified in astronomy. She knows what she's talking about and what she's writing about. Okay, so we have taken from Samyukta Nikaya and Malankara Vatu, okay, these two primary sources. They have some biographical information about Buddha. Over here, both of us very strongly put forward disclaimers that independently we should not take only this to arrive at a date of Buddha, because the information is not voluminous. Like in Mahabharata, for instance, I would think the information is a little more voluminous, the astronomical information. But we have taken what we could find, right? And using that, our approach has been to first define what those constraints are, astronomical constraints. Second, we compiled a master data set of, you can call this a literature survey from the point of view of astronomical lens, of Buddha ke dates as mentioned by scholars before us, like Kota Venkatachalam ji, like even Vel Veerarya ji, etc., who have written before us. Uska हमने एक table बनाया, right, of 42 pages. This is what of 42 tables. So this is table number 5. You will see from V.G. Ramachandran onwards, Kota Venkatachalam, Narhari Achar, D.S. Triveda, this entire table, Chinese sources, Tibetan sources, सबको हमने collect किया. Okay, what did we then do? We used Stellarium and other technologies that are available, which are good, solid technologies of our time. And in सारे dates को, all the 42, we subjected them to the same set of criteria, right, uniformly, which I think is a reasonably impartial method, right? You have X number of claims for a particular date, and you have some constraints. We subjected all those sets to the same set of constraints and saw what the result was. It so happened, and this was the actual lunar eclipse, the solar eclipse that you actually see from the software. It so happens that 1807 BCE, which is Ravi Prakash Arya mentions that before him Kota Venkatachalam ji has said, Ramachandran ji, etc. For these constraints, that date emerges as, that year emerges as the best fit. Okay, but please remember, I already said that this alone should not be the determining factor for such a, because we will need to, in today's day and age, we will need to, I think, be multidisciplinary in our approach, understand, but it is not it's not non-trivial that 1807 BCE emerges as the best fit for the constraints we consider. It's not non-trivial. Now somebody else could say, hey, but I have this additional astronomical feature that you will need to consider, or X, Y, Z, nobody else has said so far. But if somebody else comes up with something like that, we are totally open from a scientific point of view to do this exercise again, update our constraints, and see which is the best fit solution from an astronomical point of view. But until then, our limited view is that 1807 BCE is the best fit year for the constraints that we have considered from Buddhist primary sources. There is a terminus antiquum of at least 546 BCE from Cunningham et al.'s work for Buddha's date, and B.R. Mani's point of view from archaeology has said that settlements related arguments can now be laid to rest around 500 BC, certainly not, goes much before for what Hartel has considered. And from a philological point of view, right in the beginning, we showed what are the at least four kinds of issues that are there in the Western conception of the date of Buddha. There was if you can recall, there was first selection bias, right, which was the ignoring of the Puranic data point, selection bias. Then there was a hasty generalization, which was selection of the Ceylonese. Then there was, after this, a confirmation bias, which was a correction of the long chronology, and circular referencing, because the edicts were given a date based on not independent methods, but the same edicts are today used to substantiate the same date, right? And I would like to acknowledge at least these, as you can see, M.A. Troyer, T.S. Narayan Shastri, Krishnamacharya, P.C. Sen Gupta, D.R. Mankat, Pandit Kota Venkatachalamji, D.S. Triveda, Rajiv Malhotra ji, Narhari Acharji, Kosa Vepla, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who is another contemporary scholar, K.D. Sethna, and also Bechert and Dietz and Hartel, right, amongst others, who have also contributed in our study. So, this finally, I'll end with this. This is a letter that I received in 2024, September, from the Federation of Jain Association in North America. They sent me a letter based on my involvement in their some of their conferences, saying that my work on Mahavira helped them de-link Mahavira and Buddha, right? So what I've done is actually to look at when was Mahavira first called a contemporary of Buddha, right? Who made that proposition? Why was that proposition made? What were the bases of that proposition? And do they really hold now as well? So this letter I received from them saying that we really found that useful because that helped us to, my point was you should focus on Jain sources first for the chronology of Jains before you go to other sources, right? And if there are differences, then you agree to disagree. So they acknowledged it with a letter, and they have a view on where Mahavira's epoch is. It's not very divergent, but still they are dealing it from Buddha to start with, which is not a small thing for those who understand the consequences of Buddha's date. So with that, I hope I did justice to the 30 minutes given to me. Thank you very much.